Hello, welcome to the MC. My name is Ed McCarthy, and it is my pleasure to speak with our candidate for the House of Representatives from Congressional District 1, Audrey Denney. Audrey,
Hey
welcome.
Ed, I'm so happy to be here. Well, here in a digital sense, I'm happy to be chatting with you from the comfort and safety of my own home, of course.
Yes, it is definitely good to be chatting virtually. Um, so I know I have been home now for, I have lost count, 4 weeks, 6 weeks.
Hmm.
Fortunate, I can work from home. My wife works for the school district, so she is home full time. So we've been fortunate enough to stay home. Um, I've had groceries delivered and things like that. But we're maintaining the stay at home order, and we're trying to do our best to do what's right for our neighbors and not get infected, not pass it on. So
So
what's your
important.
situation like?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I've been you can welcome to my home. I live in a small studio apartment, and so I've been here um, solid since the stay-at-home order was put in. I think on the 19th of March. I try to go out and get groceries once a week, and I've got a couple of really good friends who are nurses at the hospital here in town. So I try to make sure I can drop off groceries to their houses, so they don't have to worry about it. And I went for a walk in the park yesterday, which was amazing. But mostly, other than that, I've been at home, and I'm in your same situation, Ed. I'm really, really lucky to have a job where I get to work from home. Most of my really good friends in this town, where I've lived in Chico for 17 years, and most of my friends work in the either retail or food and beverage service industry. And so, I mean, March 15th, they were all out of a job, and half of them still haven't gotten any unemployment payments yet. And so this is now a month without income for a lot of my good friends. And so, um,
Yeah,
really, that community is really on my heart right now, and
yeah,
trying to do some stuff to help them out. So
yeah. It's the right thing to do. So you've been in contact. I believe you have a faith community. Are you in contact with your faith community, and how have they adapted to this new setup?
yeah, you know what I've actually been doing. Both of my older sisters are Episcopalian priests, and they're both in Napa County, and so they both have digital virtual church services. And since virtual church is the only church we can go to right now, it's been fun for me to get to go to my sisters' churches and hear them preach. And because I normally only get to visit them a couple times a year, so getting to go to their Sunday services has been pretty go. That's been pretty great. And it's funny because my niece and nephews will sometimes pop into the camera, and it's a pretty casual deal because they're recording from home. So yeah,
That's
been
excellent.
it's been
That's
good.
excellent. We did talk about some of the folks who are unemployed being on your heart. I know that your website, I think, has some resources. So can you talk a little bit about, the resources that are out there that are on your website that, folks can access and how
Yeah,
those things can help them?
absolutely. So when this kind of got really serious around mid-March, we as a campaign team, we tried to put our heads together and think of how can we use our platform to do the most good in this situation. And it looks a lot different than it does in normal disasters, right? Normally, after the car fire, after the Camp Fire, even after the Orville Dam crisis, so it's like, okay, we know what to do. Um, Help people, make sure they have housing, plug them into other people's homes, gather resources, deliver them to the most vulnerable, work at shelters. Like, we know what to do in that kind of crisis, but this crisis was so different and so foreign, and it felt like the only thing that we could do to help us stay home. Um, but we put our heads together on the campaign team, and we decided to have just a whole page on our website that's local county specific resources that folks can go to and check out. So we've compiled sort of a database there, along with all the links to the CDC and all the other how to file unemployment paperwork. Tried to kind of make one repository of that information. But the really, really cool thing that we did that I have been really enjoying is we have this phone banking platform, to make campaign calls or whatnot. But we've been instead of making campaign calls, we've been using that platform to call people across the district and just check in with them. So I've been doing that for a couple hours a day. All my volunteers are doing that, and you can choose which county you live in. So it's like, hey, I'm in Susanville. I'm calling from Susanville, and I've had some really neat conversations, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from folks that they've had pretty special, meaningful conversations and have been able to connect people to resources. But as important as that, just also be able to be there for people.
Yeah,
The the physical distancing, we call it social distancing. I like to think of it as physical distancing because that social interaction is still so important for us to feel like we're part of the community and we're connected. And so it's been pretty neat to get to share that with folks.
Yeah, I can see that. That's really is a nice way to connect with folks. And I know that, I got one of your fundraising emails, and instead of asking for funds, there was a link directly to one of the local food banks. Have you
Yeah.
kind of been in contact? Do you know how the food banks are doing there in Tehama or in here in Shasta or out in Butte?
Yeah, everyone is struggling. Everyone is struggling with actual supply chain stuff, but also having volunteers that are healthy and safe and able to work or able to volunteer. And so, coming from an agriculture background, food security has always been one of the things that I've been most passionate about, and it felt like a really logical thing to help folks support is the food bank in their local community, right? Because I know there's obviously a big role that government needs to play right now, and I know we're going to get into that. But in times of crises, it is also so important for our community members to show up for each other and our community members to lift up the most vulnerable and protect the most vulnerable. And so I've been using the phrase like, "Hey, if you still have a job, donate to this," right? Like, if you still have a job, take some money to your food bank. If you still have a job, donate to this fund at the North Valley Community Foundation or the Shasta Regional Community Foundation, and really, really trying to help people think that way. And yeah, because it's on both ends of the system, right? It's making sure that the marginalized and poor have access to food through food banks, but also making sure that there is still a supply chain for our local farmers to get that produce to where it needs to be. So a lot of things to think about.
Right, and I know I've talked a little bit to our local farmers. We're on a Turn Creek Organic is who we go through, and they do home deliveries of organic produce. And
are they still doing their CSA right now, or?
Yeah, we're on their CSA. Great. And I chatted, and she said that she was doing well, and that they've been able to get the produce that they need, and they're able to get it out to folks. And the farmers market had started, and that at this point they don't know of any farmers that are really struggling to bring their crops to market. So I know that's been a national story, but from what I've heard, it doesn't seem to be local. Have you heard any different?
It's in our part of the world. Most of the folks who have fresh produce are going to be in the smaller scale, like small local scale that you're describing, right? Most of our big commodity crops up here are going to be almonds, walnuts, rice, cattle, hay. And then obviously up in northern Siskiyou County, we're going to get like strawberry transplants and horseradish and some of those specialty crops that they do up there. But where this is really being seen in California right now is the Central Coast area, the Salinas Valley, the lettuce bowl of the world. Fields and fields of, and my dad lives down there and kind of just off of Salinas. And I was talking to him the other day, and he's like, "Yeah, they're letting vegetables rot. They're letting lettuce rot in the fields because it's more expensive to pick it and get it out than it is to sell it." And so, we're seeing, and I could nerd out about ag. So, like, cut me off when you're tired of listening to me talk about this, because I could talk about this all day. But even like when we look at I do a lot of work with the beef industry with my job, and when we look at just the beef value supply chain, they're having to close entire packing plants like JBS because all of a sudden there's 700 cases of COVID at one packing plant that has 3,000 employees. So you have to shut that packing plant down. But when you shut down all the major packing plants, that from this point of the industry forward, right, that means there's way less beef available, but that also means that farmers and ranchers and stockmen can't sell their beef. And so beef prices are in the tank, which then affects grain prices, which then affects even the checkoff programs, the beef checkoff program. It just, I try not to get overwhelmed because I naturally have like a 10,000 foot systems thinking view. And so I like to see how all the systems are interconnected and working. But in right now in this global pandemic, I start thinking like that, and my brain goes into hyperdrive, and then it explodes. And so I try to parse off one bit at a time to be like, okay, now I'm going to think about the local economic effects. Now I'm going to think about the public health ramifications that could be in our counties in a couple of years. And so I've been trying to really keep my focus on small things so I don't get overwhelmed.
Those are definitely good things to think about. There is definitely a lot there. And
sanity tips from Audrey during COVID-19.
which, it's also a generally good tip, right? Focus on the small things that are in front of you that you can get done. Work in your community. Donate to your local food bank. That's why I thought it was great that your website has a link to a local food bank that you can donate to. Those are definitely good things, good stories. So, have you heard some good stories of what has been going on? Are there some good success stories? I know I've been fairly proud of California.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a friend who's down in LA, and he's talked about how easy it is to commute down there now because so many people are staying home.
Yeah.
Some of that's also because of job losses, so that's not
Yeah.
quite as good as
Yeah.
positive. But a lot of people are staying home. You see that in our numbers. Our hospitals are not being overwhelmed. San Francisco, Santa Clara, some of the areas where the outbreak happened early
Yeah.
still have fairly low death tolls. They're doing a good job of treating, the folks who need to be treated. So tell me about some of the success stories and
Yeah.
some of the things that you're proud of that have put a smile on your face.
Yeah. I'm very, very proud of California's response in handling this crisis. Early stay-at-home order, right? One of the first in the nation. I mean, San Francisco and then the state. The fact that even before that stay-at-home order on the 19th, I mean, the 15th, the governor sent out the notification that bars and restaurants should close. That was when he said, "Hey, if you're 65 and older, you should stay home." That was the 15th was the day. I called my mom and I was like, "Listen, it's serious. You have to stay at home." And she's like, I know, I'm staying at home." And I was like, "No, listen, the governor tweeted about it." And then she said, in a shocking reversal of roles, "You're yelling at me to stay home rather than your teenage years." Just kidding. She didn't say that. That was a meme, but I thought it was hilarious and I told her about it. So yeah, no, I've been really proud of the governor's response. I think that what we're seeing because of that is a flattening of the curve, right? What the reason our rural hospitals haven't been completely overwhelmed is because our citizenry took such heed of those suggestions. And I mean, even when I go to the grocery store, I can feel it right here in Chico, which is, one of our two biggest cities in the district. There's no one on the streets, and the only people in town that are driving are congregated around the grocery stores, and so I'm really, really proud of how we responded here in the North State. And yeah.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I actually had to go out to, you know, some concern of, supply chains going down. So I did stock up on a little extra meat, went down to R&R Meat, and, people were lined up outside. They were staying 6 feet away from each other. They were, maintaining distance. They R&R had put out tents outside to keep people out of the sun so that they had
Oh,
a
great.
comfortable spot to stand. So,
Yeah.
I definitely feel like some of our businesses have been taking it seriously, and our
Hmm.
hospitals are still seem to be doing well. So
It's
those are
fantastic.
definitely positive things. So have you kept up on sort of the federal government's response? I think we've passed two or three. I can't remember if this is the third or the
We've
fourth.
passed three. We're working on four right now. Stimulus bills is what I'm assuming you're talking about, or
Yeah,
relief bills. That's
yeah,
what
the
you would
different
call it. Yep.
stimulus bills. Can you kind of walk
Mhm.
through what you know of that's in the different bills and how those are
Yeah,
designed to help
yeah,
people?
absolutely. I'll try to not get too wonky so your audience doesn't fall asleep at the tone of my voice. But the first bill was passed actually on March 6th, so that was the first one that came out, and it was the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplemental Medical Act, or Supplemental something Act. The first one was about testing, right? So that was
Okay.
vaccine research, testing, and treatment focused, the medical focus. The second one was the individual worker focused. And then the third one that came through right at the end of March, I think the 27th, 28th, that was more about the small business and the worker focus. So that was um, Paycheck, Protection Program and the SBA loans. And then they're working on the fourth one right now, allegedly. So
So is
I'll be interested to see what's.
the Paycheck Protection Plan, is that where businesses can take a loan, and if they take that loan out and they use like 75% of it on paying workers paychecks, then it becomes a grant. So it's essentially the government is giving the employer money to pay their employees who have been laid off, or
Right. Yep. Yeah. So
stopping
the
them from getting laid off. So they're not going to be laid
right.
off. They're not going to go find other jobs. They're gonna, continue to get a paycheck from their
Mm-hmm.
employer, and are still essentially employees, and they're not on the unemployment system. They're not clogging up those calls. It's another
Right.
route to
It's
supplement their
yeah,
income.
Exactly. It's a direct assistance program for small businesses to keep their workers on the payroll, and they'll forgive those loans. They're through the SBA, and the SBA will actually completely forgive those loans if employees are kept on the payroll for 8 weeks, and the money is just used for payroll, rent, mortgage, interest, or utilities. So it's really, really specific. Um, and future relief bills, I would love to see that those protections even expanded further, because right now, if it's a certain number of employees, if you can keep them on, I'd like I'm thinking about the restaurants in downtown Chico, and if when they reopen, there's substantially less business because people don't want to go downtown because potentially they're afraid to still go out. When they're actually legally able to reopen, they're not going to need as many staff members, right? They're not going to need as many bussers and dishwashers and bartenders. And so I want to make sure that they would still be protected, even if they had to let go of some of their staff to keep making ends meet. But yeah, no, I think that was a really, really good part that came through the third bill for sure.
Okay, there was also the economic injury disaster loans. Do you know what those are or how those work? This one I don't
Are
particularly
those?
very well.
I don't know a lot about those either. Those are from the SBA too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are kind of the more small business focused. The businesses themselves can apply for, right?
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So there is one that's currently in the House of Representatives, passed by the Senate. I believe it's in the House right now. I think they may be voting on it as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
And my understanding is that it has a couple of different pieces. One is those Paycheck protection program grants. They're putting more funding in for that because the businesses have snapped those up. There's still more demand, so they're going to expand those. They're also using the economic injury disaster loans, so they're increasing more funding for those as well. And then we get into what is controversial at the moment, right? Republicans, including LaMalfa, have come out and said, quote here from his website, that Democrats are holding small business owners hostage to fund programs that have hundreds of billions of dollars unspent already. Using this crisis as a way to push their liberal policy priorities is unconscionable. So,
which programs is he talking about?
Well, I looked it up, and what it is the Democrats want to include funding for hospitals, funding for testing, which those two things are in the current bill. So Those are the things that LaMalfa is currently railing against. It's unconscionable that Democrats would include funding for hospitals, funding for tests, like the antibody test that's currently coming out, put into circulation. And the other two things the Democrats were pushing for that they didn't get were some funding for states and for counties and for cities to backfill the lost revenue from lack of sales tax, lack of gas tax, and those other things. So how do you feel about the liberal policy priorities?
Do you mind if I get a little bit angry? Because I feel very angry right now because this is just another example of how our congressman doesn't either know how to take care of the people in his district or just doesn't care to. At the very, very minimum, what this crisis has shown us is that every single person needs healthcare, right? And you would have thought with the bipartisan support of the first stimulus bill that came out that said, oh, everyone should get free testing for COVID, you would think that Republicans would believe that everyone should have health insurance, right? So besides actively continuing to try to, because this is not the first time he's done this, decrease support for our rural hospitals that already are operating on razor thin profit margins. Besides trying to cut funding for that, on top, the fact that he doesn't want to backfill what counties have, let me tell you a story real quick about Lassen County.
Okay.
Lassen County, beautiful place, Susanville, county seat. About 70% of the land in Lassen County is owned by the federal or the state government. Sierra County, also in our district, 90% of the land is owned by the federal or state government. In our rural counties, when that much land, that much of the tax base is owned by the federal and the state government, there is almost no tax base already, right? And so when the state and the federal government send down mandates, usually unfunded mandates on how our counties can spend their money, they only then have this much of the pie to provide public safety, to provide behavior and mental health services, to provide all those critical services that our counties need, right? And so the fact that our congressman won't support his local counties by making sure that they have backfills of funds that they need when their already low budgets are getting kicked even lower as a result of this crisis, is unconscionable, to use that word. And
he definitely has the right word, but what I really don't like
he's
about
using
it is
it wrong.
well, and he's also very dishonest, right? Like he's not, if you don't like those programs, then spell out what you don't like. I think some of what he's saying here is, well, we've already passed some money for hospitals, and we've already passed money for testing. Why are we passing more money for those things? And
he is regurgitating talking points of the leadership of the GOP. That is all that he is doing. And he is not thinking about how it affects the people who live in his district. And I am mad as hell, and so I'm going to take his job. How does that sound?
Hey, it sounds fair to me. I would definitely prefer somebody who's more honest and more upstanding, and a little more forthright, especially with things like, now he's really in a catch-22, because what's he going to do? Is he going to stand on his principles and vote against this bill that is getting voted on today? Or is he going to vote for things that are these unconscionable liberal programs?
Can we talk about something that brings my heart rate down? Whew. All right. Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see how he votes. It'll be interesting if he stands by his previous statements, or he folds and does the right thing. God willing, he folds and does the right thing, right?
Well, to some extent, it doesn't matter, right? Because the Democrats took back the House, right? So the Democrats are the ones that are making sure that the appropriate policies get into place. One of the things that I did want to talk about is, I don't know if you're familiar with the original Republican form of stimulus, which was simply to cut payroll taxes.
Payroll taxes, yeah.
Yeah, my understanding is that payroll taxes, and correct me if I'm wrong here, they pay for Social Security, they pay for Medicare, they pay for Medicaid, and the employer side of them pay for unemployment insurance. And the idea that you would cut those taxes right now didn't seem like the right move.
It's not. The only reason, the only people cutting payroll taxes benefits is people who have jobs, right? It does not do anything to the 22 million people and growing who are unemployed because of the pandemic. And in the future, so what I think what we're working with right now, these bills are relief bills, right? These aren't stimulus bills. They're crisis relief bills. And so that makes sense later on, and in an actual stimulus bill, payroll tax cuts could be an option for that, but it's not a viable option for the immediate crisis. If people are laid off and they can't pay rent, a payroll tax would be zero help for them.
Right.
Like many of my friends that are unemployed right now. So I think it's a great idea if we weave that into a bill in 6 months, but that's not the thing that needs to be happening right now, for sure.
I definitely agree. I mean, it would put more money in my bank account, but I'm in good shape right now.
But we still have a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it would do absolutely nothing for the folks who lost their jobs. So there's, if it wasn't for the Democrats holding the House of Representatives, those are the types of things that Lamalfa would support, that would be the line of defense that people would be dealing with right now. And it would be completely ineffectual. So a lot of the programs, like the Paycheck Protection Program, funding for hospitals, funding for coronavirus testing, a lot of those are democratic ideas that are being put into practice because they work.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, because at this moment in history, the Democratic leadership in Washington, D.C. is the party that cares about real people and that is working for real people. And at this point in history, the Republican Party, their leadership in Washington, D.C., cares about the profits of the industries and the corporations that are keeping them in their jobs. And so while our congressman will continue to vote in the interest of big oil, he won't vote in the interest of the people who live in this district, because that is what the system looks like right now. And that is the level of corruption that is my generation's job to weed out, right? Like I can go on another tirade if you let me, but like until the members of the House of Representatives and the Senate aren't bought and paid for by special interests, we won't ever see actual meaningful and lasting change on any of these issues, right? We have to elect a generation of leadership that wants to be true public servants and wants to fight for and work for real people. And that's what we're doing here, Ed.
That is
We're
what
trying to anyway.
that is what we're trying to do. So I think at that point, that is the end of section 1. So if folks are enjoying this and you want to hear some more, we will post additional interviews. Audrey and I will continue to talk and
get more fired up next time. Watch out, world. Keep watching.
We got a couple more. So, that's didn't want to overwhelm people. So that I believe is the end of part 1. Part 2 will be continued here shortly. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Audrey, for your thoughts so far, and we will continue here shortly.